In last week's parsha, it says that Esav was loved by Yitzchak because Tzayid Bepiv. The Tzayid was in his mouth. So that's why Esav was loved by Yitzchak, loved Esav, because Tzayid Bepiv. There's a machlekes between Rashi and the Arizal. What's the pshat of Tzayid Bepiv? Rashi learns that the pshat in Tzayid Bepiv is it's a reference to Esav, because Esav was a tzayid, he was a tzad, he was a hunter. It denotes and refers to the trickery of Esav. He would try to show that he was very from. Do you meiser salt? Do you not meiser salt? So he had tzayid bepiv. He was trying to like trap Yitzchak with his, his diplomacy, and he was trying to get in there. But the Arizal learns a different pshat. The Arizal learns that the pshat is tzayid bepiv. The opposite, Yitzchak had Sayid. What does it mean, Yitzchak had Sayid Bepiv? Every time Esav would come with a Shaila, Yitzchak would don the Shaila. You want to know if we have to meiser salt? This is my chance to teach him all of Hilchos Meisers. And he would bring in Esav and he would start teaching him all of Hilchos Meisers, and he would teach him. So he was sad Esav. He would trap and hunt out Esav in order to try to be mechazik and to try to make Esav back on the derech. Those are the pshatim that I knew until Shabbos of Tzeda, of Tzayid Bepiv. Now, with the Aguda, I think I was mekaving to a new pshat, thanks to the Beis Medrash Aguda, the Koilel Aguda that we have over here. We learned Sod for the last 2 weeks, and generally in the Seder Dvarim over here, we go weiter at this point. And like you heard from Rabbi Gadisman, what's the pshat that we're doing another week of Sod? The teretz is that Yitzchak loved Esav kitzayid bepiv. He knew that Esav was a hunter. And if Esav is a hunter, he donned with him all of the gishmak shailas in Sod. He loved Esav because tzayid bepiv, because since the whole entire time he was always Isaac and Seder, so Milas has feel gishmak Torah, so much gishmak shailas that you could don in Hilchot Seder, tzayid bepiv. Yitzchak loved Seder. Azovi, the good koilel, we loved Seder, so we can't get enough of it. So we have to don another week on Tzayid. Who knows what'll be next week? We have to don Seder bepiv. So let's go now to a little bit of the leftovers. They're not leftovers in the slightest that we left over, but the leftovers of Seder. And see, there's a lot of geschmack zach, and today we're going to don on cats and mice. Some of us will remember, all the different shilas we can don. Could you take a cat and stick it on a mouse? And what's the din if there's a cat and he's draying around in the Beis Medrash? Could you run after the cat and get him into the Ezras Nashim, into a smaller area, etc.? We have to don. I'm going to go somewhat a la Seder. Many of the things the Olam has learned already. I'll try to do a little bit, somewhat a la Seder, and different shilas. Some of the things, there's one Nakuda in the beginning that the Olam didn't get Marmakayim on that I just want to mention because it's more related to Sif Aleph. And then Amiz Hashem, I'll go into Sif Beis, which is really, I know that the Olam did the Marmakayim on. So the truth is that right away, there's a big shaila that you have to don. And this is a Maisa Shahaya a few weeks ago in Yerushalayim, Mirakodesh, that there was a cat in a shul. It was in my shul. There's a cat that was in the shul, and it's a 2-part shaila. I'll tell you one of the parts right now. There was a cat in the Etzim Beis Medrash, the Beis Knesset, and the Gabbai wanted to at least run after the cat to get him into the Ezras Nashim. It was for Friday night. There weren't ladies there, and Melly wanted to know, can he just run after the cat and just get him into the Ezras Nashim? Would be easy. He'll just jump through the window and he'll go into the Ezras Nashim, and he'll be in the Ezras Nashim. So the shaila is, could you do such a thing? Is that called Seder? Because the Beis Medrash is much bigger, the Ezras Nashim is much smaller. Now there's going to be another part of the shaila, which Amiz Hashem we're going to don soon, but let's don the shaila as if that's the entire shaila right now. Can I run after a cat in order to catch that cat? Can I run after the cat in order to catch that cat? Right now, the cat is going to be trapped in the Beis Medrash. The cat is going to go from being in the Beis Medrash to going into a smaller area. What's the need then? At least in this specific case, do we say that when you have a cat in a large area, a Beis Knesset, but that area is already considered trapped somewhat? In other words, we know that there's 3 levels. There's the level of where something is impossible to typhus. It's very difficult to be typhus. I won't be able to get him. And then he's not trapped at all. To go from that situation to a matzav of where he's trapped, but that I can't typhus him with chad shchiyah, I can't get him with one chopping, and I maybe have to run around all day long in order to get him, but maybe we'd be able to get him. So that's not an issa deraisa, that's an issa derabbanan. To get him from a matzav of where he's totally free to a matzav of where I could theoretically get him, but not with one chopping, that's an issa derabbanan. And then there's a matzav of where I can get him now with chad shchiyah. I would just run one grabbing and I'd be able to get him. And that would be to get from the matzav of where he's free to that matzav, that's going to be an issa deraisa. What about if I take an animal, let's say a cat, and he's right now trapped in a way where he's considered nitzad midrabanan? I can't chop him with one chopping, but he's definitely not free. And I want to put him into a smaller area, like in my case, the Ezes Nashim. But even in the Ezes Nashim, it's still not going to be able, because a cat is a very sneaky guy, it's still not going to be able to catch him with one shchiyah. So am I allowed to be mitzamtzim his area? I went from a bigger area to a smaller area. But nonetheless, I still don't have the ability to trap. I still can't trap him. He's still not within my reach of a one shchiyah. What's the din b'kai govna? It's very interesting. Very interesting. At first I thought there might be a machlekes in this, and now I say I'm not so clear that there is a machlekes, at least halacha l'maisa. In the Shmir Shabbos, in Perek Chav Zayin, it's very sadistic shaila. You think there would be a Gemara about this or a Rishon about this? It's a very sadistic shaila. And do we say that in the end of the day, you're going from a drabanan to drabanan, so you didn't do anything? Or do we say, no, in the end of the day, you did go from a more trapped matziv to a less trapped matziv to a more trapped matziv? The Shmir Shabbos brings down the Gerin Rishon Zalman in Perek Chav Zayin Ha'ora Kuf Chav Beis Nira Demuter Lachnes Tzvi Mi Bayis Gadol Echad L'Sheni, from one Bayis Gadol to another one. Umuter Lachnis Al Yedei Pesach Shebein Shnei Abatim. He is Magbos Cheres a little bit more. Since Seif, even right now, you are Mechusar Tzeda, and you didn't klape your tfisa on the animal. You didn't get any more tfisa. Now, we could dan, Rabbi Isai, this could be totally in the big chakira in Seder. The Olam, I'm sure, learned already about the chakira. Is the lumdus of tzeda that I'm being shoylo the cheres of the behema? That's the malacha, that I'm removing the freedom of the behema. Maybe that's the uptight to the malacha. Or is the malacha that there's an acquisition? Dainu, not just that I took away his freedom, but that I acquired something. You could then, maybe it's totally in that shaila. If the lumdus is I was shoylo the cheres, so I certainly was shoylo the cheres more, so then I could hear that it would be aser. Rishon Zalman is saying no, that it's not aser. Why? Because the lumdus of the malacha is the acquisition. What did you do over here? You weren't able to get him now, and you're still not able to get him. Maybe it's a mashu easier, but klape the deraisa and the derabbanan, you didn't do anything. You didn't do anything. And I did see that Rav Nissen Karelitz in the 121st page of his Sefer Chutshani seems to say not like this, and he seems to taka say that enachanami. He writes, you want this animal to be in the other room, which is a smaller room, and at dayin it's going to be mechutzer tzeda. So he says like this. He says it depends why you're doing it. He says if you stop doing it to trap him, it's a problem. He says, but if you're doing it because you want to rid yourself of the animal, you're doing it not to get it, but you're doing it to get rid of. In other words, right now he's in, let's say my example, he's right now in the base medrash. And you're running after him to put him in the Ezras Nashim, which will still be impossible for you to chop, but it's a smaller area. So he says, in that case, you're not going to call that Seder. In other words, if I would do that to get him from the outside into a small area, even though I just want to get him out of my chutzner or something like that, so that he says would be a problem. That of course would be a problem, because he went from him being totally free to being mugbal his freedom. But let's say he's already not totally free, and I'm putting him into a small area. So Rav Nissen learns if you're putting him into a small area because you want to have him, then that's a problem. But if you're putting him into the small area because you want to get him out of that area, says Rav Nissen, in other words, what this is, I guess what he's saying is he's being nachas to Ar Chakira. He's saying if you want to dan, was his freedom removed? It's true. His freedom was removed somewhat more. He no longer has that same level of freedom. So he could have done to say that that's considered taka a maisit seda. And that Rav Nissen says that At Kama that you're trying to get rid of him, we don't look at that as a Ma'aseh Seder. Now, the Etzim Svara, we're going to talk about a little bit later, Mitzvah Shem, toward the end of this year. But here you see, L'chaira, that there seems to be a Machlekes Rav Nissen and Rosh Hashanah. But in my case, everyone will be Mekel. Rosh Hashanah is going to be Mekel because you went from a big area to a small area. But who cares? Saif, you're unable to chap it. Saif, you didn't do a Maisa, which is considered more Tzeda. Rav Nissen will say that he's Mekel, even though you did do a Maisa more of Tzeda, but you're not doing it for the purpose of getting, you're doing it for the purpose of getting rid of. That I just wanted to throw to the Olam. It's related to Sif Aleph. And let's go right now to what we left over in Sif Beis. In Sif Beis, Rabbi Yisai, there's a Gishmak Shaila, which is Mamish Negeya, brings us back to the Haim. Whoever remembers Tom and Jerry. Oy, it's a medrash somewhere, don't ask. But whoever remembers the cat and the mice and dust, no. So we have a big Shaila. Am I allowed on Shabbos? I found out that there's a mouse in the house. Am I allowed to take my cat or not my cat? And bring the cat into the house and just let him loose and let him go after the mouse. And that's Gavaldik. Then I won't have this problem. The cat will be happy. I'll be happy. My wife will be happy. The only one that won't be happy is the mouse. But you'll have to do that on Shabbos. This brings us into many shaylas. You say this in Hilchos Shabbos also. Many, many halakim. Let's go build the building, and then afterward, we'll dive the Shaila specifically. The starting point of the Shaila is the Ramah in Siman Shinta Zayin Siv Beis. Says the Heilige Ramah, Rebbe, Amishase Kelev. If you have a dog and you rile up the dog to run after a deer on Shabbos, have a tzeda. That's the Deraisa. And then the Ramah goes on and says, you should know in general, hunting, that's for Esav. That's not for us to do. Because of Moshe Fleitzim. It's a famous tshuva from the day of Yehuda. This is not our Geschäftheit. So comes along the Mishnah Berurah explaining this Ramah. And he says, you know what we're talking about over here? We're not talking about what you think, that you just took a dog and said, sick, go and get the deer. In that case, says the Mishnah Berurah over here in Tzivkat and Yud, like the Olam sees, in that case, that would not be called, if I just say sick, then that would be a grama. It would still be aser, but that would still only be called a grama. It's a derech of the malacha, but it's not enough of the derech of the malacha to be considered deraisa. What's the Ramah talking about that you're chayiv, which is a Rambam? That's talking that you did mice in the dog. You say the dog run there, I run there. We trap it together. Says the Mishnah Berurah, lo yasa mice batzma mice klal rak b'machi shisa. That's only the Rabbanan. But if you yourself are running together with the dog, that's a deraisa. So the starting point of our shaila is, I'm certainly not running after this mouse. I bring the cat in, I tell the cat, get the mouse. That's the starting point of our shaila. What's the din b'kai govna? Is that called Seder? So now that I'm not involved, you all know that's not deraisa, but it says in the Mishnah Berurah, it would still be a Seder d'Rabbanan. We didn't don our shaila yet, but that's the starting point of our shaila. Number one, the first thing we have to don before we get into our shaila is what's the pshat in the Ramah? The Ramah says that if I just say to the dog, go get this deer, or like our case, I tell the cat, go get the mouse. So b'kai govna, I'm over on Seder d'Rabbanan, not deraisa. I'm not over on deraisa. I'm only over on deraisa if I'm involved also, and my body is also moving and also doing the Seder. But that seems to say that it's potter, it's not a deraisa, it's a grama, and it's not deraisa. Comes again the Avnei Nezer in Siman Kufta Rivav in Ois Beis, and he has a great kasha on the Ramah. He said, he's asking a kasha on the Ramah. How could the Ramah bring, he brings over here from the Kolboy, how could the Ramah bring over here? And he's quoting the Mogen Avram, that if you didn't involve yourself in the action, you're going to be potter. If you didn't involve yourself, so then it's a grama. He says, l'chayra, if it's your own animal, if it's his own animal, we know that on Shabbos, there's two other halachas that could be involved over here. There's one halacha that can be involved over here, which is known as shvisas be'emtai. My animal has to rest on Shabbos. Over here, my animal's doing one of the lamites malachas. And not only is my animal doing one of the lamites malachas, I'm causing my animal to do one of the lamites malachas. So if we're talking about that it's your own dog, so then you're not over on a drabanan, you're over on a deraisa of shvisas be'emtai. So he says, you know what you got to say? Sarch loymar mayri shakel avena shaloi. Dim loy came to be an issa Torah of shvisas be'emtai. So this is the first nidin of the Avnei Nezer. Now, boy, say anybody learning the Ramah is not going to know that. The Ramah says, "Hamashasa kelev He's going to know that it's not referring to your own dog, because the only din, I'll explain, the only din of Shvisas Behemto is when it's your own animal. I have to make sure that my animal does rest on Shabbos, L'man Yanuach. So on my animal, there's a din of L'man Yanuach. On my friend's animal, is not. So you're going to have to learn, says the Avnei Nezer, that this Ramah is talking about that you use your friend's dog, because if you would be using your own dog, so then it would be a deraisa regardless, even if you weren't involved. So how could the Mogen Avraham say that the only reason why it's a deraisa is if you're involved, even if you're not involved? That's in fact that you're allowing your animal to do tzeder, and Adarabah, you're causing your animal to do tzeder, so then you should be over on Shvisas Behemtai. Elamai, it must be, we're talking about, says the Avnei Nezer, it's not your dog, and therefore you're not over on Shvisas Behemtai. That's the Avnei Nezer. Might say anybody reading the Ramah is not going to know that the case that we're talking about is that it's not your dog and somebody else's dog. The simple mashmoyas in the Heilig Ramah is that it is your own dog. And afal pikein, you're not over on other ice, only drabanan, which brings back the kasha of the Avnei Nezer. If it's taka, your dog, so then why don't we say that you're over on Shvisas Behemtai? Your animal's working on Shabbos. He's being tzad on Shabbos. He's Esav. He's working on Shabbos. So this Maisa will have to be Mistamech, which is Mistamech, the Pashup Shat, in the Shevet Levi, in Chelik Gimel, in Siman, in Beis. Ois, Beis. Shevet Levi says, no. And how do you let your animals eat grass on Shabbos? How do you allow your animals to eat grass on Shabbos? It's yummy. That's very nice. But he's doing koitzer. So says the Shevet Levi, it's Yisayid Gadol, Milchus Shabbos, it's a Gemara Shabbos, Davkucha Beis, based on a Mechilta. That we say Shvisas Behemtai, and it's said in the Lashon L'man Yanuach. L'man Yanuach says the only time that there's going to be a problem with Shvisas Behemtai is when it's considered a tircha for the animal. But let's say it's considered a pleasure, Zehana Osa. It's considered a pleasure for the animal. So then if it's considered a pleasure for the animal, then we don't look at it as a job. Some people love their jobs. So when this animal's eating the grass, we don't say he's being over on koitzer. He loves that job. Even though you have a benefit of what he's doing over here, that he's going to be weeding your or he's being pruning or whatnot, but he enjoys it. Says the Shevet Levi, Gevaldik Svara, an animal, right? Tam loves to eat Jerry. I can't remember now which one was I can't remember in the Medrash which one was the cat and which one was I think Tam was the the Tam loves to eat the Jerry. So the cat loves to eat the mouse. If the cat loves to eat the mouse, the dog loves to sick the deer. He loves running after the deer. That is a no. So therefore, it doesn't have any parsha of Shvisas Behemtai. Shvisas Behemtai is when the animal's doing a job, but when he's doing something that gives him pleasure, so then it's not considered Shvisas Behemtai. So that's the first shayla of the Avnei Nezer. So far, the Ramah is Kipshutai, and the Mogen Avraham is Kipshutai, Mishabur is Kipshutai. If you run after the animal, you're even deraisa. If you didn't run after the animal and you tell the dog to do it, so you're over on a drabanan of Grom of Seida, but you're not over on Shvisas Behemtai. Kum to gain the Avnei Nezer is another shayla. What about Mechamer? Mechamer, it won't even help us if it's not your dog. If you cause an animal, Shvisas Behemtai is when you're not causing, the animal just does it on its own. But if you cause an animal to do malach on Shabbos, so then that's not considered just Shvisas Behemtai. That's considered mechamer. You're causing the animal to do malacha. And that's also not even with your own animal, that's also even with somebody else's animal. Over here, you should be over on mechamer. He says, maybe it's Einoi Barer Shasigenu Akelev. Maybe it's not clear that the animal is going to be successful. And Taka, if it would be Vadai, it would be successful. He says, maybe it even might be a Chiv Chatis. He's afraid it might even be a Chatis. Again, comes along the Shevet Levi and Chelik Gimel Siman and Beis in the same Ois Beis, and he says, he doesn't understand the Kasha. All the cases that we found of Mechamer are always that he's doing some type of a pa'ula. He's doing some type of a pa'ula of a shad that the name is working. So he becomes a shutif in the malacha. But he says, we never find, it got to be the Shevet Levi to say this, especially to argue on the Avnei Nezer. He says, we never found in the Ganta Shas or Paiskim a case of Mechamer where I just sit back, press my button, and the animal does everything for me. That's not called Mechamer. Mechamer is when I'm involved in the pa'ula, and then I become a shutif in the pa'ula. So far, we're good. The dog case is not mechamer because I'm not doing anything. The dog case is not Shvisas Behemtai because he's enjoying what he's doing by sicking the animal, by going after the deer. The door case is not say the deraisa because I'm not involved with my action. It's only a grama, but it's still a grama. So now let's come back and down in our case. Am I going to be allowed on Shabbos to take my cat or a neighbor's cat? And now we're seeing that won't make a difference because there's no shvitas b'amtoi and there's no mechamer. Can I take my cat and bring him into the house or somebody else's cat without touching it? Muksa, I don't want to get involved. Pets is a problem. Muksa, can you do obviously, like it says in the Shulchan Aruch, it's Mishnah Ches. Let's see if I think about my test. But barring that problem of muksa, you'll direct him. You direct him with your foot, let's say. And now, are you allowed to take a cat and bring him into the house? And that way he'll eat the mouse, and then you can have a Shoyim Shabbos, a Ben Abbas. So here's a very interesting shayla. Because the Chayr should still be in a Sidra Banan. And I saw Taka that the Machzal Yo, the Falk, Zeichet Tzadik Levracha, he wants to say that it's Taka in a Sidra Banan. If you're not involved in it, it's the Rabban. If you'd be involved in it, it might even be the Raisa. So if you take a cat, he says no different than a dog. The Ramah said the case of a dog, but more than a cat. If you take a cat and you put him in there and he runs after the mouse, so then why should it be any different? But the shayla is if we could dan a tzad, say maybe it is a little bit different taka. And the truth is, the idea I see really already in the Chashukei Chemed, Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein, in the Sechta Shabbos and Dav Kuf Chof on the base. And there's a need over here, which we could dan a little bit. He dans halachatik. I want to dan before it. It's always important to be makdim chaveroi, but I want to, in order to enjoy Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein's makdim rabbi kamuvan. But in order to enjoy Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein's svaras, if we could just add one svar, it'll so much enhance the Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein's svaras. Over here, I'm very misupik, Rabbi Yitzchak. If when you take a cat and you put him into a house, is that the same as what the Ramah is talking about over here? If I say, the Ramah is talking about that there's a dog, and you start ricing on the dog, you're being mishasa. Mishasa means you're inciting over here his desire to run after the deer. You're doing something. You might not be doing something after the dog starts running, and therefore it's only a gram. You might not be doing a pa'ula at the same time, therefore it's not mechamer. And the dog might enjoy what he's doing, and therefore it's not shvisas b'amtoi. But you were the one that got him all started. You're pumping him up, and you're getting him. You're the coach that's pumping him up to go and get the deer. So the Kai Govna, that Rabbi Isai, I understand, is a Maisa Grama. That's your Maisa. It's not Mesiaches just to the dog. That's your Maisa because you started the whole thing. A cat, the natural Metzias of a cat is on its own to search out the mouse. You don't have to rice him on. You don't have to incite him. You're not going to do anything. You're going to bring him into the house. He's going to, on his own, just run after the cat. I just wonder, Abaisai, if that's his normal teva and there's no megara at all. You're not being megara the Baal Chai to run. You just put him in the house. He does his own thing. What does that have to do with the Ramah B'chlal? It's a big chiddush. The Machzal Yo, I think. The Machzal Yo understands the same exact thing as the case of the dog. So it's hard for me to argue. Rafalk was my Rebbe Zeichet Tzadik Levracha. So I wouldn't just argue. But now if you'll see svaras from Rabbi Zilberstein, that in the first place, the ganze Shaila might fight sich nicht on. Plus, I'm not sure if there is an Isser of Mishas over here. So now we'd be able to perhaps be makel in this case. Rabbi Zilberstein goes on to say, look, what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a cat trying to get a mouse. I'm going to add a little bit to Rabbi Zilberstein. Most of it comes from him. But if I say we have to dan b'chlal, which is now brings us to Sif Gimel. What's the din of a mouse? Is a mouse a min nitzait or not? Now, it's not. Sometimes it's a mouse, sometimes it's a rat. I think the ones we have in our house are clearly not min nitzit. Now, don't get confused. Like I always say, min nitzit doesn't mean do I trap it? Of course you trap it. You're trying to trap the mouse. Min nitzit means it's min nitzoid. It's something that you want. It's a description. It's an adjective. It's not a verb. Do I trap it? It's an adjective. Is it a type of animal that you trap to get? Is it a min nitzit? I don't think anybody's trapping these mice in the house or the rats. Now, I know you're going to say there's a scientist out there that he's trapping and whatever. First of all, I don't think he's trapping anyways, because I think they just breed them. So I don't know anyways if they're trapping them. But Akoponim, this already is an old shaila of rats and mice. The Gra in the Elia Rabbin, Kalim, Saiperk, Tes Vav, Rebbe Kiva Eger on the Magen Avraham and Sif Tes. You have the Nazer and Shin Pes Tes Vav. They all go very strong that a mouse is not a min nitzit. Now there is a Chai Yodam not like that in Klal Lamed and Sif Zayin, and he was the Mechutin of the Gra. So I don't know what was going on over there. I have my Sveikis. He's coming, Betzin, though, to argue on a Magen Avraham. He's coming to argue on the Goyim. So therefore, certainly we have a tzad that a rat, a mouse, is certainly an ein b'mina nitzit. So we're dealing now with the double d'Rabbanan before we begin. It's a ein b'mina nitzit. D'Rabbanan. It's a grama because the cat is doing it on its own. I'm telling you, it might not be a malach at all. It might be not anything because the cat is just doing his own thing and you didn't get involved at all. So it's definitely at least a double d'Rabbanan. No double d'Rabbanans we're not making, but it's a double d'Rabbanan b'makim wa. Am I trying to get it or am I trying to get rid of it? That's already additional ein sarich legufay. I don't want it at all. I want him out of here. So it's again, I'm trapping to get him out of here. Number two. Number three. The oid, it's a makom tsar gadol, it's a makom mitzvah. You can't have your Shabbos suited there if you know there's a mouse there. So if you add all of that together, and I'm a supik if in the first place the whole shiloh starts, because it's a meshasa kelef only when you're meshasa, not when you're doing for a cat. So then I think we could be makos. Anybody has a shiloh, he wants to bring Bain his own cat and another cat and get him into the house and kick him into the house without obviously moving muksa and let the cat do what the cat does. The chayra, it is mutter. Derech agav, once we're on the topic of meshasa, and once we're on the topic of a person ricing on an animal in order to go and do his malacha, etc., it's a very interesting Mishnah Berurah and Shin Kav Ches that you can't forget. Shochach, Simin Kuf, Sivkotin Kuf Mem Gimel, where he dines over there. That there's the Shulchan Aruch, it's really Gemara, that talks about if you say a certain chant and al yedei that you stop the snake in his tracks. Another example of when you're speaking and you're doing a tzeda. We just saw speaking, which is considered a tzeda, at least midrabanan. Now, you did a chant, which now the snake can't move. And it says over there in Shulchan Aruch, it's mutter. It's really a Gemara that says it's mutter. What's the pshat? How come you're allowed to do this? So he says, Mikol Makam mutter, the ains that say the tivis. The Avogav, the Paskinin, and Shinta Zayin, that feel lots of the hedge and mutter. So Istami has the kashal char. If it's a snake, you're allowed to kill him anyways. You're allowed to trap him anyways because he's dangerous. So he says you have to say that it's a rachlik case. You see a snake from far and he's not going to get you. So the halacha is you're still allowed to say this chant. If anybody knows the chant, you should tell me derech hagav. But you're allowed to say the chant, and that's going to stop him in his tracks. And that's not called Seder, because the only time it's called Seder is when it's a Seder, which is not a skuli, ruchni type of Seder. It's a physical Seder. Very interesting. The Stipler in Baba Kama and Simon Memei Noise Space is a big arichis about this type of shaila in general. The Stipler in general in Baba Kama spoke about damaging with skuladik damages. I think we spoke about it in the past. Person that damages with ayin hara, and on Shabbos also. And he dies. How did Moshe Rabbeinu write this every Torah on the day that he died? He wrote it was on Shabbos, and it's a hashpas kulmes, and he wrote with a pen with Yidei being mashpia the pens. The chayr does that have a din of ksiva in halacha. So now we have another shaila. Is Seder Tivis, that Seder skuli at Seder, which is done with some type of a chant, is that considered a Seder deraisa? The disciple says, Loich Shem Shabbos, Loich Hashem Seder, and he writes like this. He says, Shabbos gam ba'oisek lachayad potter, the kol echad ava yedei skula v'loi b'teva is not better than klachayad, the ein kach derech asiyas hamalacha. You're going to say if it's klachayad, it should still be an Issa D'Rabbanan. So Stipe says in brackets, yeah, but it's a weird situation. Chazal weren't geyser on that. I know the starting point of when you do a malacha boif in skuli, the starting point of such a thing is that it's not considered normal. It's not the normal derech seder. It's klachayad. Once it's klachayad, it's only D'Rabbanan. Chazal weren't geyser on this D'Rabbanan. As they gave the Stipler. If you want more further reading on this, in the Derech Emuna, Mechain Kanievsky, Hilchos Shmita Yoifel, and Perek Aleph, Halacha Zayin, in the Bir Halacha. I'm sure anyways the Olam's learning Shmita this year. So Ayin Sham has a whole beer about this to be mechalik between Shmita and Shabbos. Ayin Sham, the So that's what Rabbi say is number one. Excuse me. Now, the next thing we have to talk about, Rabbi say, is going back to our cat case. Now, before, I only told you half the story. This brings us to a little bit of a very interesting topic, actually. Excuse me. Very interesting topic over here, which you could you can, by accident, ask a stira in the Bir Halacha, and there's really no stira. In other words, like this. In my case with the cat in the base medrash, there were two issues. Issue number one is that we were going from the main base medrash to the Ezras Nashim, going from a bigger place and being mitzamtim and being magbil as cheres into a smaller place. And that we spoke before, and we said if the place that we were dealing with was anyways uncatchable, and we went to a smaller uncatchable place, Shalom Zalman said it's mutter gomer, and Rav Nissen Karelitz told us it's mutter al kapanim, I'll be at kama, that I wasn't doing it to get it. I was doing it to get rid. Now, let me change the case a little bit, because the real case wasn't exactly like, the real case was that in the main base medrash, he was really uncatchable. Now, in the Ezras Nashim, it was much, much smaller. And to a certain extent, it could have been considered that we were able now to catch him with chachchia. However, there's a catch. There was a window that was open. The window had bars, but that's not going to stop the cat. There was a window that was open. What the Gabba wanted to do was run after the cat, get him into the next room, which is a much smaller room, and then he won't bother everybody here. Now that is a much more serious shaila, because in the smaller room, it would have been somewhat more accessible. But mitzat sheni, there's a window there. So how do we do this? There's a window there. The cat can just get out. And I'm going from a big place to a small place, but in that small place, he has a way out. At first glance, it sounds like there's no shaila, because I didn't trap him. He has a way out. What's the shaila b'chlal? So the Bir Halacha in Sif Aleph is mesupik about this shaila. The Bir Halacha and Dibra Maskal at the end of Dibra Maskal Shehem, he mamish talks about this case that I'm running after an animal that is free right now, and I'm running him into a place that he's going to be trapped, but he's not really going to be trapped. It's going to, I guess, look like he's trapped, but theoretically, he'd be able to get out through a hole. Now, right away, before we continue, it's very hard to understand this Bir Halacha, because there's another Bir Halacha in Sif Daled, which says mefurish that this is not a problem. The Bir Halacha in Sif Daled, Dibra Maskal B'Lvad, says that if there's a chor gadol in the kaveres, he's talking about in the beehive, there's a chor gadol, and you put over this sheet, but there's a big hole over there. So he says, that's not a problem. Ein nitzaydim klal. So what is the Bir Halacha talking about? In the Sif Aleph, the Bir Halacha says, maybe he's not sure. Maybe I'm not allowed to trap, my case, a cat, in Ezras Nashim, when there's a hole that he can get out of. He's not sure. Later on in Sif Daled, he's 100% sure. He says it's pashit, if there's a hole there, he's able to get out. But Rabbi says there's no stira. The Bir Halacha is talking about two totally different things. In Sif Daled, the Bir Halacha is talking that the bees are already there. And when the bees are already there, for example, let's say the cat was already there in Ezras Nashim, and I want to lock the door now, but he can still get out through the window. That's mutter gomer, because you didn't do any action. And he's not trapped, because he could just go out the window. What the Bir Halacha in Sif Aleph is mesupik about is what happens if I'm running after him. And I imagine what the Bir Halacha means is that's a tzur of Seder. You're running after him, and you're putting him into a place where it's less, it's much more mobile, and it looks like you ran after him. It looks like you did a ma'aseh Seder. Now, it's not really a ma'aseh Seder, because he could fly out the window. He could just run out the window. But it's a very different case in Sif Daled. Sif Daled is talking about that the bees are already there and they have a way out. So you're just covering him. Okay, but he's there already. So you didn't put him there. Did you trap him? You didn't trap him. He could just get out. But what happens if I have a case of a cat that's in a big base medrash and I want to put him into a little base medrash? I run after him until he goes into that little base medrash. And now I got him in there. I got him into this small area. Just what? He can get out. Beseda, but it looks somewhat like trapping. This is the stuff of the Bir Halacha. The Bir Halacha brings a Tosefta, which possibly even wants to be machmir like this. He brings down, his lashon is, yesh l'stapek and hichnes oif l'bayis badelis psucha, mamish our case. You throw the cat in, the door is open, even maybe it's not a derabanan. He's not sure, maybe there's not even a derabanan, but then he goes on, but Tosefta, it sounds not like that. Mashma, it's pater, this case, pater usually means pater of alaser. So in my case, it would come out, the chayra, that it should be pater of alaser. But you have to know, Rabbi Yisai, that the Avnezer and Kuftari Hesiv base does not understand this Bir Halacha. He doesn't bring the Bir Halacha. But he says he doesn't understand how anybody can have a tzad. He says there's no difference between that case and what I told you by the Kaveres. I made a chilik. He said there's no chilik. If there's an open window and he can get out, that's it. It's not Seder. And the Ksei Shulchan in Siman Kuchav Aleph, Siv Aleph, the Ksei Shulchan says, you can't bring a raya from the Tosefta that says Potter Val Asar. That's a klal in Shas. In Toseftas, maybe Potter means Potter Val Mutter, says the Tosefta, and he says in Svara, it can't be. And I saw the Shmir Shabbos in Perek Chav Zayin, Ha'arakuf Memvav. He says, you could be Mekel b'makim hefset. You could be Seimach on this kula, then the Biur, against the Biur Halacha Safek. No, in our case, the cat was wreaking havoc in the Beis HaMedrash. Number one. So that's for sure a makim hefset. Number two, I'm a stupik in the Ezes Nashim, he was catchable because it's a cat. Number three, even the Biur Halacha is mesupik and Avnei Nezer is Mekel Legamri once there's a window. Number four, I just wonder out loud, like when you're dealing with a cat and cats just like come into a room and fly out windows, and I wonder if it at all has any agbala at all. And therefore I told the Gabbai in this case, you can run after the cat and run after him into the Ezras Nashim. And from there, anyways, the cat is probably going to go outside. So that's what Rabbi Yisai is the second Indian. The third Indian, Rabbi Yisai, third Indian Rabbi Yisai is also very, maybe to us, it's not as negaya, this Shaila. Excuse me. Actually, I want to mention one thing before I go into the final topic, which is the topic of domesticated animal, semi-domesticated animal, that I want to go into in a moment. I just want to mention something very important. When you learn this simon over here, so then we're going to see there's a lot of a term of tsar. So one would be tempted to think that, we saw a lot of Eterim, even at a tzad, that a bee is considered tsar enough to trap a bee. Certainly, if it's a tsar that's hezek, you certainly can trap it. We saw even a bee, the Mishabura was mashma, maybe there's a makom to be makel. We were ma'arich on this, both shirim. The grass was machmir. That's interesting. One would ask the question, I have a choice, getting bitten by a bee, which we have a tzad to be makel. My other choice is to be up the whole entire night because that mosquito is buzzing in my ear and eating me alive. There are some people that would say, you know what? I'd rather the bee bite me one time and get it over with, assuming he's not allergic, whatever. But a lot of people would say, I'm not interested in the mosquito buzzing. So if you want to ask somebody, what's more of a tsar? Somebody might come to you and tell me, listen, I don't know, more of a tsar, not a tsar, but for me, it's a very major tsar to not be able to sleep the whole night. So maybe if this, we'd be allowed to trap the mosquito on Shabbos. It doesn't sound like that anywhere in the Simon. It doesn't sound like that anywhere in the Simon. And Taka the Shmir Shabbos in Perek Chav Hey, in Archav Aleph, he brings down Lo Yitiro. He brings a cloud from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Shlomo Zalman says this in the Shulchan Shlomo, Shmir Shabbos. Lo Yitiru. It's a big cloud in Hilchos Shabbos. Everybody say Lo Yitiru ela b'makim sheyesh tsar haguf. All of the terim that you're seeing in our simon are when the tsar of the guf, the person is suffering. But b'makim shemitztayer tsar nefesh. But if he just is, he's troubled, he's bothered, he has agmas nefesh, as it's called, kegoin, like a mosquito that's making all this noise and driving him crazy. Aser l'toif soy v'lazorgo echutza. Sitaka says that it is aser. Now, I don't know. There's a shmua b'shem Rav Elyashiv that if a woman was afraid of we call them jukes in Eretz Yisrael, of a cockroach, there's a shmua that Rav Elyashiv Taka was willing to be makel on that because it's ein b'minu nitzay and you're just doing it to get rid of, and it's tsar, which you would see there that the tsar that we're dealing with is not a tsar aguf. And that's why before, when I was one of the kulas that I mentioned in the case of the cat running after the mouse was because the people had tsar. That won't shtim, the tsar aspect won't shtim with Rosh Shlomo Zalman. But again, as it's sirif to all the things we spoke about before, certainly there would be a makom to be makel. That's one nakuda that I wanted to mention to the oilam. Another nakuda I want to mention to the oilam is, in general, am I allowed to take a pesticide? Obviously, to take the pesticide and spray it straight on the animal, so you might be killing the animal. That for sure is a problem. And not only that, even if you're not killing him, but we spoke out in the first year that if you're spraying it on him and slowing him down, so that also might be considered sud. Because now he's not able to move. And you made him from a moving juke to an immobile juke. That for sure is a problem. But what if I spray in the area where the ants are, not at the ants? I spray it so that the ants should go away, or I spray it that the jukes should go away. Am I allowed to do that on Shabbos? So the truth is very interesting. I saw in the Mishnah Halachas in Chelik Zayin and Siman Memches, he basically, as a Arichas here, he basically wants to say that it's Aser. And he writes at the end, he says, Ein heter l'zalef b'Shabbos sam l'zvuvim, afilu b'oifen she'ena mizalef al hazvuvim mamish. Even in a situation of where you're not spraying it straight on the animal, he says it's Aser. I have a hard time understanding this. Because I think the Metzias is that anytime you're going to spray a pesticide, it's definitely not a psik reisha that you're going to trap him. It's definitely not a psik reisha that he's going to die. Basically, it's a very ganz-feine situation that he might just go away because he doesn't want to get the pesticide all over him and, and have, all different types of ailments as a result. So I don't think it's a psik reisha at all that there's any hariga or tzeda taking place over here. And I would have thought that if you're doing that, as long as you're giving them an escape route, which is, let's say, a window's open, or let's say for ants, the whole house is an escape route, and as long as you're not doing it straight on, I would have thought that such a thing is taka mutter. And I'm not sure. I think the Shmir Shabbos could be, this is what he's saying also in Paraklaf Vav, mutter l'shtamish betachsher koitel charakim. You're using a pesticide near them, and you're not killing it. As long as you're not trying to kill it, you're allowed to do it in the window. But it's ein miskav, and it's not psik reisha. So l'chayra, it seems to me that it is aser, it is mutter, excuse me, and this is the lie sefer Mishnah Halachas, like not like a Nasha Klein. Another shayla by say that the poskim all dance klape our sugya of chayvel. So we should mention at least something now that we're going to Keseder of the Simon over here. That was more in Siv Zayin and Siv Ches. Back to Chayvel, the poskim dan a shaila of a person. Sometimes I was told maybe in South America they have this type of mitzias that you can have a situation of where there are ants all over the floor and you can't walk outside without killing ants. So the shaila is allowed to go to shul, and this became like a big shaila in many places. What's going to be with shul and everything? So, and there's another shaila. Maybe can I just go out? Because you're for sure going to kill some ants. I imagine that when you walk to shul, I don't know how many you're going to kill, but you certainly are killing some ants. So this was a big nidin, and when you put together a lot of the svaras that we spoke about in many of these shurim, so they want to say it's a psik reisha, the loy michale. It's not the normal way of killing. That's kalach yad. It's definitely a kilkul, and it's b'makom mitzvah. Psik reisha loy michale kilkul kalach yad is l'chayra b'makom mitzvah. The mitzvah is to be able to go to shul. So there is a makom to be makel, but it's not pashat at all. Not pashat at all. Meaning, maybe to go to shul, you'd be able to be makel. Right? With two drabanans to go to shul, I think for sure we could be makel. But to start go to a neighbor and to a friend, that gets involved in the shita of Rabbeinu Tam and Reish Mem Ches, and going to a friend, is that considered a mitzvah? That we'll have to leave for another time. The last part of the sugya, Rabbi Yisai, is Sifyud Beis. And that we weren't zeicha to talk about together, but I'm sure the Olam learned the sugya. So I'll go a quick sikum la'alocha l'maisa of what comes out of Sifyud Beis. This is the big sugya that the Olam who just learned HaRav just encountered, the sugya of a domesticated animal. And what basically comes out, and we'll masader it in a moment, based on Shulchan Aruch, Sifyud Beis, Shavua, and Zayin and Ches, is a lot of very important kulas. Now, in our society, many of us don't have pets, but certainly in the olden days, chickens and everything, this is very normal. And there are 3 levels of animals. There was a level of an animal which is fully domesticated, a cow, and he is considered trapped, and there's no say at all. The other extreme is an animal that you own that either he's not used to the place yet. He's not used to you just bought him on Erev Shabbos. And if you would open up the cage, he'll fly out. B'kai Govna, you have to make sure that when you open up the cage, you put something over it that at no moment he can fly away. Because then you won't be able to get him back, because that would be Tzeda Deraisa 100%. That's the other extreme. He's totally not domesticated. What we're going to focus on is the semi-domesticated animal. The Gemara talks about semi-domesticated animals. These are animals that be'etzim, they come back at night. They know where their bread is buttered. So this is a big shayla. What's the din of a semi-domesticated animal? Is it doraisa? Is it mutter? Or is it darabanan? So this abayisa is based on a big stira l'chayr in the Mishnah and Daf Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph and Shabbos says chayev v'oif b'rshutzai pater. A chayin oif that is in your rishus is pater. That means if you trap it, you're pater. This is talking about a semi-domesticated animal. And it seems to say that it's pater. Now, it can't be that it's fully domesticated because pater sounds like pater of al-asr. L'chayra. So this would sound like to us that something that's semi-domesticated is pater and pater of al-asr, seemingly. But there's another Gemara. There's a Brisa in Beya Daf Chav Daled Omid Aleph. The Brisa in Beya says, Avoizim v'Tarna Goylim are mutter. If you have geese and you have chickens, it's mutter. The Brisa in Beya says. So what's going on over here? Over here it seems to say, a chayin and oif in my rishos is pater of al-asr. I'm not allowed to trap. In Beya it seems to say it's mutter gomer. So this is the major fight. There's barach 3 or 4 malachim over here. I'll say them bekitzer and then we'll go alach l'maisa. The Shulchan Aruch's Shita and Sifrit Beis in this is the Shita Samachaber. This is the Shita of the Marshal Be'emes also, that they go, that the answer is very simple. The answer is this pater means pater of al-mutter, and there's no kasha. So semi-domesticated is like fully domesticated, and there's no sugya of semi-domesticated. According to that, all the shadows we're going to talk about are going to be mutter, which it's important to note, because I saw many svarim that ask, I'm going to say certain kulas of the Mishnah Berurah soon, and they ask, why is the Mishnah Berurah being so makel? Now you know the secret, Rabbi Isai, because in the end of the day, the Shulchan Aruch was makel anyways on all these shabbos. I'll say what the kulas are in a moment. But I saw the Rosh Shabbos, he's very bothered. Why is the Mishnah Berurah being so makel? It doesn't stem with a lot of the klalim in Hilchos Shabbos. The Mishnah Berurah is going to have all types of kulas of two drabanans and whatnot, but the rest of Shabbos we're not makel. The answer is, because it's not so poshut in the first place, it's usher. That's a sheet of the Shulchan Aruch. That's how he answers the stira. He says there's no stira. Pater of al-asr, it's not true. It means pater of al-mut. Lemaisa, the Vilna Gaon, he answers this question with a very, very unique mahalach. The Gaon at the end of the Siman, the Gaon wants to say there's a difference between chickens and geese, and there's a difference between the chayas and oifis. He wants to say when you're dealing with chickens, interesting type of a svara, chickens is mutter. The linear ain't sarch l'chalik, ella avoizim and chickens and geese. Their derech is, I guess, to be more subservient. They're not like deer, and they're not like chayas, build the chayas. That even once you get their subservience, but you still, it's never mamish, never mamish eved avram anoichi. It's never ad kedei kach. So beside, he wants to say that if you're dealing with a chicken, that's the Gemara in Beya Daf Chav Daled that says it's mutter. If he's semi-domesticated, that's mutter. Other animals which are semi-domesticated are pater of al-asr. Again, this will certainly answer up Rosh Shabbos and Shaila, why we're going to see certain kulas in the Mishnah Berurah over here. If you're going to be dealing with a chicken, so then you're going to have to know that, very good. Number one, I could be maybe add siruf to be makel because the Shulchan Aruch is makel legamri. Number two, if we're dealing with a chicken, the goyin is makel legamri. Our halacha is based on the Ramah, which is a different shita. That's the shita of Tosfos and Kuvav Beis. That's the shita of the Rambam, the Ramban, the Rav Rishonim, and they go that in order to answer up the stira, you have to say a tremendous chilik between Shabbos and Yom Tov. Be'emes on Shabbos taka, any semi-domesticated animal is an issa d'Rabbanan to trap. And even though you know he's coming home at night, but right now he's not, so you can't go and get him. Chutz from the muksa issue, you won't be able to kick him in. Mashain came in Beya where it says it's mutter. They allowed you to trap a semi-domesticated animal for Simchas Yontif, because over there it was a chicken and he wanted to shecht it. So there for the Mok and Simchas Yontif, like we find many times. So they were makel even on the Tzeidah. So what's the answer? The answer is all semi-domesticated animals are Issa D'Rabbanan. Yontif is different. Yontif, it's mutter to get semi-domesticated animals in order to have for the Simchas Yontif. How do we paskin? The Heilige Ramah paskins taka just like that. That's a sheet of the Ramah. The sheet of the Ramah is semi-domesticated animals are Issa D'Rabbanan. Now comes along the Mishnah Berurah, and he has all types of kulas and siv katan and zayin, siv katan and ches, which I'll try to be masada right now. But again, if you're going to have the kasha, now we're going to see the Mishnah Berurah is going to have incredible kulas over here. Now you don't have the kasha anymore because the Mishnah Berurah knows in the back of his mind the Shulchan Aruch was makel, and the Mishnah Berurah knows that the goyim was makel akopon on chickens. So now we're going to add that together with a bunch of tzrufim, b'malkim hezik, b'malkim hefsid, b'malkim this, that, and whatever. The Mishnah Berurah is going to be willing to be makel. So what are those cheshbainis? One kula, the Mishnah, I'll go one by one. One kula, the Mishnah Berurah says over here. And all these kulas are also found in the Mogen Avram, the Mishnah Berurah, and Sivkot and Zayin. Mishnah Berurah says that if the children are running after the chicken, you don't have to be meicha. You don't have to be meicha. Right away, Achreinim ask, what's going on over here? Well, why is he being so makel? Now you know the secret. The secret is the Shulchan Aruch was makel, the Goyin was makel if he's running after these chickens, and it's a makim hefsid. So the makim hefsid, you don't do it because the Ramah said not to do it. The chicken's going to run away, perhaps, right? So you don't do it, but your children can do it. They're underage minors. They can be saying, look, your children could be Spartan. They can be saying on the Shulchan Aruch. Your children could be Grunics. They can be, Chaim Berliners, no, nicht gefährlich. That's one major kul over here. Another kul over here, the Mishabur and Sivkot Nun Zayin says that if the chicken is going to be lost, you can get a goy to get it. Why? It's a shvus to shvus, b'makim hefsid. So the Rosh Hashanah says, what? Shvus makim hefsid, we're not makel on. It has to be a big hefsid and whatnot. No, not such a kasha. You have the sheet of the gra, you have the sheet of the Shulchan Aruch. So you there goy, you could also be makel. Number two. Number three, the Mishabur over here has another kula. Mishabur has a case. You could stand in front of the animal, the chicken, and not let him run away, that he shouldn't run away. Okay? Maybe Ishladen. Mishabur has another chiddush over here that maybe you could kick him into the house if it's a house of where you won't be able to trap him with one shchiyah. Because now that's a drabanan semi-domesticated. To catch him in a derabanan, into a place of where I wouldn't be able to get him with one chapping, right? Also, if I kick him, there's a tzad, the Masas Binyamin said that might only be a kalachayat type of tzeda, not a real type of a tzeda. The Mishabur has another kul over here in Sivkot and Zion. Mishabur says that, actually, one moment. Then the Mishabur gets involved over here, b'makim hezek. Mishabur now is in Sivkot and Nun Ches. And also in Bir Alocha Dibra Maskal Lotzid. And he says Afshir on this, but we know that the Afshir, the Mishabura, has probably said B'Makim Anivus. Here the Mishabura wants to be makel that B'Makim Hefsid, Hezek, when this chicken is wreaking havoc and he's going to damage other things, then it could be that you're able to go and get this chicken into his coop. You'll be allowed to sud the chicken into his coop. Now, what's this? Semi-domesticated, which is Durabanan. I'm not trying to get him. I'm trying to get rid of him. So that's not a malachat srich leguf. I just want him out of here because he's damaging things. He's running around and making all types of a problem over here. So it's Durabanan number one, semi-domesticated. Durabanan number two, it's ein tzarich leguf. I don't want it. I want to get rid of him. I'm not trying to acquire him. Number two. Number three is that it's b'makim hefsid. Okay. That's the cheshbon of the Mishabura. The whole entire cheshbon over here is that also we can mitzaref the sheet of the gra, and we can mitzaref the sheet of the Shulchan Aruch. So now, if you have a chicken that's being, a little bit naughty, and he's running around your house, and you want to take him and you want to kick him into a chicken coop where he's going to be gechapt. If he won't even be able to get him when he's in there, so then for sure. But even if when he's going to be in the chicken coop, he'll be gechapt. So what is this? It's a derabanan, b'makim hezek. So it's only a malach shein tzricha legufa because I'm not trying to acquire it. No, b'makim that the goyin was mekel legamre, the shulchan was mekel legamre. So there, the kaikavna, we would be able to be mekel. The chzaynish and nun beis to Zion, he has another kula. He has a case of if there's a sar balichayim and the chash hefsid together, beinyan chash seide after an oif bershusai, he says a filu according to the machmir, which you know that the chazanish isn't going to be so mach, because you know that the chazanish is going to very much be machabed the shita of the gra. But he says even according to the machmirim, it's only in the Sidrabanan, so it could be mekel and be saimach on the matirim if it's sar balichayim and hefsid. Let's say you want to trap this chicken and put him into his coop because you see he's not eating and he's running around all angry because he's hungry. So he's also damaging and sar balichayim. So he says you could be mekel, and then he says yesh lahakol isser muksa b'shvil sar balichayim and hefsid also. So those are Rabbi say, in a nutshell, is the very geschmack sugya of tzeda and chayvel. And we saw today the tzayid bepiv. We saw today what's the tzayid bepiv of Inzir mentioned. Why was Esav beloved by Yitzchak? Because he learned the sugya of tzeda together with him. He had the geschmack of the sugya of tzeda. We saw that when you want to run after a cat and to be mitzamtim him into a smaller makim, so to go from bigger to smaller if he's still inaccessible, so that we saw as a big makim to make. In our case, it was going into a room that had a window anyways that the cat would be able to get out of. So that's certainly we could be makel. But Avnei Nezer was makel legamrei. In that case, the Mishnah Berurah is Mesupik. In that case, we saw the chilik between the Bir Halacha and Sif Aleph and Sif Daled. One is that he's there already, and one is that you're running after him to get it there, where the Bir Halacha was Mesupik, but the Avnei Nezer said that it should be makel. We saw to sick a dog, that if you're involved, could be deraisa mamish. If you're not involved, so then it's darabanan. It's only a grama. Mechamer was not a problem. The reason it wasn't a problem because you're not doing an action. Shvisas b'emta, it was not a problem. The Nezer said because it's not your animal. We said even if it's yours, your animal, because the animal enjoys it, so that's not shvisas b'emta. But we said by a cat, there could be an additional spar over here to bring the cat to go after the mouse, because the cat itself, there's no mishasa b'chla. When the cat is doing it, he's doing it out of his own accord, out of his own nature. You're not doing anything to incite him. That was one spar. Plus, b'makim, that you're just trying to get rid of him, and it's only a grama, and there was tsar, even though we said that Rav Shlomo Zalman said that tsar that we're talking about has to be a tsar of the guf and not a tsar of a ruchanitic tsar, but the Rav Yashiv and a tsar, not like that. B'makim, all of those kulas would be able to bring in a cat, even if it's your own cat, and allow him to run after the mouse and do what he's supposed to do with the mouse. And then we saw if to go to shul, if there's ants, there was a makom to be makel because the makom mitzvah that we saw. And then we saw the sugya of an animal which is a semi-domesticated animal. We saw that there's three types of animals, but Al-Kopanim the the semi-domesticated animal. We saw a stira between the Gemara and Tav Kuf Zayin to the Gemara in Be'et Tav Kuf Daled. The Goyin learns that the answer is very simple. The answer is his chickens are different. The Shulchan Aruch learns everything is mutter. And the shita of the Ramah, which is our Iker Psak Halacha, is that it's mutter, akopanim, b'makim yontif, simchus yontif, but otherwise you have to be machmir that it is an Issa D'Rabbanan to do tzeda on a semi-domesticated animal. But akopanim, we saw many kulas from the Tribur and Sivkatan and Zayin in the Nuches. The makim hefsid, he allowed the child to do it, he allowed the guy to do it, he allowed you to stand in the door. Those were the kulas in the Mishabur. The makim hezik, the Mishabur had a gavaldik kula that the makim hezik, you're allowed to go and put him into his place because it's only semi-domesticated. No, so it's because you're not trying to get it, and it's semi-domesticated. No, but makim the guy, and you can be makel. The Chazanich was makel. Hefsid, the makim tzar b'lechayim together. And it's Hashem. We'll go weiter next week. That's Hashem.